Hi, I'm Bill McSherry. I'm here in the Community Spotlight Gallery of the Southeast Museum of Photography on the Daytona State College campus. I am grateful and honored to have a presentation of my architectural photos called Convergence on display. The photos you see here were taken over a 10-year period and feature my architectural photography, which is predominantly about lines, forms, shape, and other graphical elements of design. The title Convergence suggests that converging of lines and shapes and forms. I have been a photographer for about 15 years. I have always had an interest in architecture. Having grown up in the constructed world, it came naturally to me. I particularly like to feature portions of buildings that suggest the greater whole but have a visual integrity all of their own. I have worked at narrowing and refining that technique over this period of 10 years, and the photos that you see here are throughout the whole period. But there are several that represent different periods of the work and have elicited more interest than some of the others. I'll start by talking about those. Much of my work is simple and uses pieces of buildings to represent the whole. For example, the Chamber of Commerce building in Jacksonville with a streetlight in front of it, not exactly what you would think of as a typical photographic subject, but because of the blending of the design of the building and the functional design of the light, it worked well together. And I've gotten a lot of good response to that photo of a very simple subject. Similarly, I have a picture on display of a parking garage in Tampa, Florida. Again, not what you would think of as a primary photographic location, but I had gone up on the garage to photograph some buildings across the street. And when I came back down, I looked up from the stairwell and saw a great shot of receding elements of design. And that's been a very also favorably reviewed photo, and one that I find proves the maxim. You can take a good photograph of a common subject if you frame it right and it's lit well. And a lot of my work tries to find what's extraordinary in the ordinary in architecture. There's a photo of the Douglas and Anderson School of the Arts. It's one of the oldest photos in the collection, but it was a very interesting graphical building, and above it floated a cloud that kind of just gave a sense of completeness to the composition. And it's again one that's been well received by many people. I also photographed some industrial subjects. There's a couple of pictures here, one of a industrial silo that has some very interesting shadows, again emphasizing it's really more about the light than it is about the subject. Another of the photos that I get a lot of comment on is also of an industrial subject. It's really electrical conduits and boxes and so on, shot in Charleston, South Carolina. Charleston's an interesting city because they've got all of these historical buildings, and if you look at it from the front side, they look magnificently historical. But if you go around into the back alleys behind these buildings, well, they've had to modernize them because they were built before things like electricity and plumbing. And so I've got a photograph here of electrical conduit and boxes and things like that have been adapted onto the backside of the building, which make kind of their own unique design. Not exactly what the city fathers were looking for, but an interesting kind of artifact of the modernization of Charleston. I find photographs like that in several historic cities. This is probably my favorite of those. I also like to work in fog, and there are several of my photos here that were taken in fog of bridges and other locations. Fog is always an interesting environment for me because you can't really plan for it. It's either foggy on that day or night or morning, and so you just kind of have to get up and follow the light and photograph that way. And so I've got two pictures of bridges in the Jacksonville area that were greatly aided by the presence of fog that I wasn't really expecting when I opened my door that morning. Shadows to me are an important part of light. People say you need interesting light, but what I find is you don't really get interesting light unless you have interesting shadows. And I have a photograph of downtown Jacksonville taken from the Main Street Bridge, where you see the bridge work, you see the shadows, and they all kind of frame the downtown buildings in Jacksonville. That to me is an important dimension to photograph, is how you can use the light that's available to find the shapes and find the forms that create an interesting environment for your subject. The other interesting part about this show is that it is both in color and black and white. While for many different forms I have favored black and white, when it comes to architecture I have worked in both mediums. People ask me, do I tend to see in black and white for the black and white photos? The truth is no, I tend to generally make those decisions in post-processing as to whether I think an image will work better in black and white or color. Some things just seem to be natural. When you look at some of the downtown areas, for example, there's not a lot of color present, and what color is there may distract from the graphical elements. In other cases, however, when you have photos that are also taken in late afternoon light, even if even things like bridges, which aren't normally colorful, the light kind of dictates the color of the subject and makes it, I think, work better under those circumstances. Particularly a good example of warm color is the Ron John Surf Shop in Merritt Island, Florida, where I caught the building in the late afternoon right after a storm had cleared. The sky was particularly gray, but the color of the light made that building, which is already a warm color, pop out from the background even more. Similarly, night photography, very often the color of unnatural lights flatters the subject much more than the daylight. Whereas I have done some monochrome work at night, I find that I prefer color under most circumstances for my night photography. On the other hand, some of the things like lighthouse interiors and some of the bridges, not taken at the magic hour, if you will, work better in black and white, and I've represented them as I have, I guess the best way to put it is as I have felt them when I looked at them in post-processing. And some subjects work both ways. I just usually choose the one I think that has the best advantage for the subject. People often ask me if this is commercial work. This is work I do because I love to photograph. I love working in the architectural world with my photography, and I do other types of photography, but this is emerged as a clear love of mine and is reflected in the work you see here. I tend to pursue these projects as I have the time and the energy, and I will drive to various locations, spend a few hours getting somewhere to photograph buildings and things that I've heard are interesting, or I've researched them online, or just have a suspicion about a particular area, like Tampa, Florida is much more of an architectural wonderland than I think most people suspect, with various styles of buildings and from different architectural periods. And so my goal for the future of my photography is quite simply to get better. People ask me if they think I'm good. I don't know the answer to that question. All I ever want to be is better, and I will continue to work with architecture and other subjects and hope to get better. The biggest factor for people who want to do this kind of thing is you have to get out there and you have to practice. You have to look at things in different ways. Just not shoot the first thing you see when you walk up. Shoot that for sure, but also keep refining. Look at buildings from different angles. Whatever you're photographing, look at it from different angles and do a lot of it, and that will help you advance. I'd like to invite you to come and see this show, and I think you'll enjoy it if you do, and I thank you very much in advance for making that effort and coming to see my work.